We had a wonderful start, especially with Chai's poetry, with Mike Murphy giving a shout out to our own John Dean right here. We'll have two poetry panels. This is today's, and our moderator is Lyndon Bickett.
Well, hello everybody and welcome back. I hope you feel refreshed after that little break. It's so wonderful to be here with all of you this afternoon. I've been thinking about this conference for such a long time and looking forward to it and anticipating it, so it's really exciting to finally be here with you. My name is Lyndon Bickett and I'm a lecturer in literature and religion from the University of Edinburgh. I work there at the School of Divinity. I don't know if anybody's been to Edinburgh before. Great, one hand at least. Well, I work in the School of Divinity, and in our quadrangle there's a big imposing statue of the 16th century reformer John Knox. He's a very angry Protestant with a beard. So I finally feel as though I've come home. It's great for me to be in these surroundings. Thank you so much to Mark and to Joe and to John and to Angela and everyone else who has worked really hard behind the scenes to make this happen. And thank you also to everyone at Villa Malta who have worked hard to make this such a welcoming and friendly place. I'm so glad to be joined here today by a group of very esteemed poets working in the Catholic poetic tradition today, whatever that is, and we'll obviously discuss that together. We have poets here from the United States, Poland, Ireland and Italy, and I'm really looking forward to hearing them reflect on the ways in which their cultural contexts and histories and backgrounds inform their poetic practice. It's going to be such a treat for us today to hear these people read their work. It's one experience reading poetry on the page in solitude, isn't it? It's a private experience. And it can be a profound one, but hearing poetry read aloud is completely different. Its rhetorical power, its emotion will be so much richer, so we're very glad to be here for that. How it's going to work today is that I'm going to ask all of our poets just to introduce themselves, to say their name and where they're from. They'll all do that one by one, and then I'm going to ask them each to choose one or two poems that they think really embodies or reflect their engagement with Catholic faith or culture as a shaping force in their poems, and then to take a few minutes to talk about this. And then we'll have a conversation together, and then it's over to you. It will be your chance to join in the conversation and ask questions and give us your reflections and your thoughts on the evolving conversation. So without further ado, I will start at the furthest away poet from me. I'll ask you to say your name and where you are, and then we will work one by one down here.
Good afternoon, everyone. That's a little loud, sorry. Oh, sure. Good. I was suddenly terrified that I was starting this. I thought it was going to be last. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Philip Metris. I'm coming from Cleveland. I've been there for 20 years, and I'm the descendant of Lebanese and Irish refugees.
Good morning, I am Daniele Gigli. I come from Turin in the north of Italy, and I'm an archivist as my job, my principal job, and I try to write Italian poems and translate T.S. Eliot, which one is my greatest love, poetical love. Thank you.
Please feel free to stay seated and just speak into the microphone. you can just stay where you are if you like.
It's not working. Didn't work.
I love to talk from the cathedral. My name is Tadeusz Dąbrowski. I'm a poet, essayist, critic, sometimes editor of the bi-monthly magazine, literary magazine, the only Polish poet at this festival. And then author of 9 poetry collections. Thanks.
I thought this was to be a poetry reading. It looks like musical chairs at the moment. Michael Murphy has already done a very good job in introducing me. John Dean from Achill Island off the west coast of Ireland. If you've seen a recent movie called The Banshees of Inisherin, that's me.
But all his fingers are intact.
My name is Angela Alaimo O'Donnell. I'm from Fordham University in New York City. I'm a professor there in Catholic Studies in English, and I also run the Curran Center, or help to run the Curran Center for American Catholic Studies. My middle name, Alaimo, is Sicilian. My family is I'm half Sicilian, half Roman. The O'Donnell is the gift of my husband. So thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Pietro Federico. I've been living in Rome for 10 years, but I come from Bologna, a little more up north, farther up north, and my father is from Sicily, and I'm very proud of that. And I'm an educator, and I use poetry and silence mainly to awaken the senses of kids, especially kids. I love teaching silence and poetry, just to awaken this, like a true sense of reality in them. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, all of you. And so I think we'll begin. I'm afraid to make you go first again, Philip.
Are you really doing this to me?
If you would mind, and I think you can stay seated unless you want to come here, but if you wouldn't mind beginning by reading your poetry for us, and then taking a few minutes to talk about this. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm just trying to make sure I don't go over my 8 minutes, but beginning with some silence is not a bad thing. So I'm going to read 2 poems. And the first is called Devotional After a Muslim Prayer. Light my face and light the flesh of my flesh. Light each my eyes and light inside my sight. Light the light that makes me light in the bones, and in my hands light, and in my loins light, and light your light before and behind me, above and beneath me, light to my right and light to left, light to my enemies who in the moral dark will use my light against me. Light the dull swords of my ribs, the thick fist within, light the blood-hot rooms pulsing there, light the gates when they swing wide to the stranger, light more light on my tongue, in the light, light more light, in the black light, and when it's time to snuff this wick, light that light. And I'm going to read one more, totally different. I live in a modern Jewish Orthodox neighborhood in the suburbs of Cleveland, Ohio. And the encounter with my neighbors and their faith practices has been deeply informative to our family as our children have been growing up alongside them. So one of my children is Adele. She's referenced in this poem, and her friends were Helen and Tehillah, sometime friends, I suppose. This is a book dealing with the Israeli and Palestinian conflict, and I think we see in our world ways in which big conflicts like that are seen in everyday life, and I suppose I was trying to bring it down to a smaller scale, but nonetheless a vivid one. So this is called The Daily Contortions. He's rushing down the block, away from shul, dressed in black hat, black coat and pants, black socks peeking beneath lemon yellow Crocs. Yom Kippur, my daughter's 8-year-old friend Rahel informs us, you can't wear leather, you don't eat, you get the chance to become an angel. The kids are gathered around Yael's swing, whose arc's so wide you wonder if you're flying. The only grown-up I give underdogs, which means helping others to wing, as Layla says, still lacking letters. Yael, our neighbor, the spit and image of my daughter, refuses her pretzels. I don't give non-Jews pretzels, she explains, then, but I can give them to my dog. But Adele's almost Jewish, Rahel insists. Aren't you, Adele? Who among us does not want pretziola, little rewards that monks would grant to children reciting Bible verses, which, read wrongly, one day would darken into Kristallnacht? The little arms folded in prayer, a crucifixion treat to savor and swallow. Here, the daily contortions continue. Who can do what and who cannot, and by what law is it possible? And to sate which God hungry for our obedience? I want to shake this little angel, her flaming words expelling my daughter from the garden of her sunburned yard. But like in the dream, when a door opens to another room in your home, Rahel turns and breaks her pretzel, handing the savory splinter to Adele. So Lyndon very poetically offered us a question, which was, how does the form that the shaping force takes in poems, takes us in these poems? And I have to say that thinking through the form of each of these poems was something that was more like Levertov's organic form than anything else. I encountered a bit of Islamic prayer, and at a time when I was seeking prayers, when I was suffering from some terrible back pain, all the prayers that we go to seem to not provide balm. And I had to find some other language to find it, to try to soothe myself. And that language accrued around the words that I found in that prayer. It's a sonnet. With a boatload of repetition of light. I needed all the light that I could imagine. And I find that there's something about form which replicates this kind of, the creative, the poesis, the sort of incarnational aspect, that somehow, strangely, that there's something instead of nothing, and that something is of such myriad aspect and beauty and mystery and sometimes terror. The architectures of sound that poems are like little momentary cathedrals. That's the way I think of it, I suppose. The second poem is a vignette, which references all the little stories we know. What I found, and it's a prose poem, and what I wanted to do in that poem, I think, is to center the ways in which we navigate otherness, which is at the heart of so much of our conflict. And growing up Catholic, the lens for observing and thinking about this always seemed to be acknowledging the fundamental dignity of each person and to celebrate actually in the fact of our myriad diverse manifestations. The book is really informed, I think, ultimately by a longing for and a belief in that peace is possible between people regardless of how different they are and from whatever traditions they come. And I'm at 7 minutes. So I'm just going to reread the devotional poem and then finish. Devotional. Light my face and light the flesh of my flesh. Light each my eyes and light inside my sight. Light the light that makes me light in the bones, and in my hands light, and in my loins light. And light your light before and behind me, above and beneath me. Light to my right and light to left. Light to my enemies, who in the moral dark will use my light against me. Light the dull swords of my ribs, the thick fist within. Light the blood-hot rooms pulsing there. Light the gates when they swing wide to the stranger. Light more light on my tongue. In the light, light, more light. In the black, light. And when it's time to snuff this wick, light that light. Thank you.
Good morning again. First of all, I would like to apologize for my English unfluent at all. I hope that the path of poetic language, as normally happens, could go beyond the wall of my Italianness. So I'll start reading my two poems in Italian so that the sound can reach you before the sense, as I always try to do when writing. Then I'll try to answer the questions Mark Basca and Lyndon asked us about our living relationship with Catholicism and its shaping force. Finally, I will reread the poems in the beautiful translation that Father Joe Simmons gave me as a gift. Here's the poems. There are two fragments from a long poem of 2015, Fuoco Unanime in Italiano, Anonymous Fire. A mezzogiorno, nell'apice della rivoluzione, quando per troppo ardore oscura il fuoco bianco, o al volgere dell'anno a mezzanotte, quando la rara luce agghiaccia e flette sulla neve da chiarore strappa dal muro d'ombra i margini dei monti. Vuoto delle parole che si svuotano, si incancreniscono, edificano in sé la propria tomba. Fuori dal tempo e dalle cose piegano l'idea, l'asservono, assise al desco degli inerti, dei vomitati dalla bocca. Kyrie brulica la torma delle voci calcate l'una all'altra in movimento. Kyrie invoca il coro univoco e discorde, straziato a un fuoco mai attizzato, senza remissione. Eleison, per che cosa? Il mormorio sommesso copre il passo, brucia sotto cenere, confonde colpe, smorza meriti. Pietà per quale colpa? Che dolore rendere giustizia? Si impastano giudizio e fatto, si elidono, fingono coincidenza, arresi alla menzogna lieve delle cose, del qui e dell'ora fuori dal qui e ora. La terra delle ossa senza tendini, dei corpi sfarinati è adesso e in ogni luogo. Passa in un'epoca l'acciaio della notte, il fremito dei corpi senza nome. Now some word, forgive me. Now some word about the shaping relationship between Catholicism and the two fragments I read. I think that from my return to the Catholic faith 20 years ago now, this faith has begun to shape my poetry, principally in shaping my thoughts, my way of thinking. It's a metania, as the ancient father said, or in the apostles' word, a renewal of the mind. Do not conform the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Romans. Surely there are, in these fragments I read, some punctual references to the scriptures. In the first, Revelation 3, and in the second, penitential liturgy, the Kyrie, and Ezekiel 37. But these references are somewhat an accident. The real shaping force of Catholic faith to me is not a cultural reference, but a cultural orientation, a way of looking at, a sort of third eye that corrects and directs my two physical eyes. It's a sort of strive between the partial vision that all of us have and the complete vision, the vision of hope, that sometimes God gives us staying with Him. It's metania, as I said. It's a constant dialogic path of conversion. Try to not conform to the pattern of this world, but to God's gaze of hope. That hope that I haven't, and that he gave to me, staying with him. Now I finish reading again the fragments in the translation of Joe Simmons. Forgive me. At midday, in the 8th revolution, when with too much ardor it darkens the white fire, or the turn of the year at midnight, where the rare light freezes and fleets on the snow, gives light, breaths from the wall of shadow on the edges of the mountains, avoids the words that empty themselves, going gangrene, building in themselves their tombs. Outside of time and things, they subdue the idea, enslave it, seated at the table of the lukewarm, or those spit from the mouth. In the other fragment, Kyrie swarms the throng of voices, trod upon each other as they move. Kyrie cries the one discordant chorus, tormented by a fire unkindled, without remission. Elation for what? The quiet murmur covered their steps, burns under ashes, confused faults, muffled merits. Pity for what fault, justice render for what pain? Judgment and deed commingle, cancel each other, feign coincidence. Surrender to the slight lie of the matter, of the here and now out of the here and now. The love on unentombed bones, on moldery bodies is now and everywhere. The still of the night persists in an era, the frail of bodies with no name. Thank you to all.
Can you hear me?
No,
Yes. Oh, great. Hello again. Just at the beginning, I would love to apologize, Ewa Chruściel, because in my introduction I said I'm the only Polish poet at this festival. She is a Polish poet too, but living in the States, but writing in Polish. So I am, to correct myself, I'm the only poet here who came directly from Poland on foot as a pilgrim. At the beginning, a little background. I grew up in a strongly Catholic family. I've never escaped the church, but of course there were moments of doubt. And I would say that when I was a teenager, my faith was more like heritage, something which I got naturally from my parents, but I didn't know exactly what should I do with it. And in my 20s, I started to understand and to feel that I really need this relationship with someone higher than my narcissism. And I tried to, it was natural. My faith have been refined through my own experience, almost through my suffer pain when the next lovely people from my family were passing out. So, and I felt also this need to face, as a teenager, to confront myself with this Catholic tradition, sometimes to scoff at some religious Catholic values. And then I was reading the poems like this one. My grandma was running, she died 2 years ago, she was running a little store with religious souvenirs, like many stores here in Rome, with some Chinese, Catholic Chinese souvenirs. The other part of the truth. Grandma runs a shop selling religious souvenirs, and yesterday, for nothing at all, she gave me a St. Francis, fully aware that I have a little Jesus and a blessed Sister Faustina from the very same set. This morning there was a St. George, but he's gone now. He should be here soon after Sunday again, and not just him, says Grandma to people, and people often listen to her and respect her. Around Friday, heaven arrives. They no longer supply hell. It stays on the shelf too long. But I've got hell at home, as well as heaven and the saints. And when I get bored or sad, I set out just opposite heaven and hell. To heaven and place the ones from Grandma. In hell, a piglet, a supper, and a diver. So I was reading such a poems to clear my own and to find what my own faith and need to believe in God is. Or laundering dirty money, for example. The coffee machine gives me back 7 zlotys. There is a whole 7 too many. Whose is this money? I'm wondering whether I should accept it because the money might have come A, from Satan, B, from God, C, from the coffee machine. Behind me are now several people who will not hesitate. I decide to give back what isn't mine. Regretfully, I drop the coins into the slot, but they fall out at the bottom. Seemingly the same ones, and yet they are different. For these I know are from God. But I have to emphasize that religious poem or metaphysical poem is for me every poem which exceeds me, which forces me to ask again the very fundamental questions like who I am, or rather how I am. And I have to say that because the question or the theme, the topic of this little speech was how or which way Catholicism inspires me. I would say it's not kind of inspiration. Inspiration is something you can choose from the world, from the reality, from around of you, but it's more which shapes my thinking, my conscious, my also my poetry voice, and something which comes from within, from inside the words. So being influenced means, in my case, being filled with something which is higher than me. And the very important part of faith, of believing, is misbelief and doubt. And I would say Czesław Miłosz wrote in his poetry Tractatus, one day I believe, another day I don't. And I would say I believe, sometimes I believe and don't believe at the same time. And it's like with a coin. Belief, faith, and misbelief. There are two sides of the coin, of one coin. And when the coin is in movement on the table, when we are playing with the coin, when it rotates, doubt, misbelief, and faith are becoming one ball. And I would say that the good poem and religious thinking and religious sensibility is a kind of coin which needs to be in a movement. In this introduction, in these 3 essays, we have heard that movement of thinking, of emotions, movement is the most important part of faith, and I think that poetry is always, it's also to keep the coin moving, rotating in our mind, in our soul. So I will finish with a short poem with the word God, because you can have such impression that I've been always laughing about my Catholicism. And now I will finish with a very serious poem without the title, because the most serious poems don't need titles. So there are three asterisks, mysterious asterisks. God has not retired, as Simone Weil would have it, a huge distance away, but he's right here, so close that I can feel his caring non-presence, which is a word passed over in silence, an aborted gesture, a suspended gaze, a breath held for a moment. That not breathing, that's your life. Thank you.
Sorry for musical chairs again. I never feel happy reading poems while I'm sitting down. They get the better of me. If I'm standing over them, I think I can deal with it. But I am actually very moved by Thaddeus and his theories of how the writing happens and Catholicism, what it means so much. I am from Achill Island, which is a very, very beautiful part of the world, and I speak in a totally unbiased fashion here. Every day when I was growing up, I could shout with joy. I could say Laudato Si every day. But the Catholicism in which I was brought up was severe, apophatic. I have a few words down here. God was unapproachable, invisible, unmovable, and in fact, unlovable. So I lived for many, many years accepting all of that. The word that I use for it is I was impermeable. I was surrounded by an umbrella, and truth, the word, change, movement, could not reach me. I found poetry, and this gradually took away the umbrella from around me, and I became permeable. Therefore, what Michael Murphy read earlier on about the movement of the Holy Spirit is, in fact, a belief that I have come to, that with a lot of work and preparation, if you like, it is the Holy Spirit that finally moves the poem into position. I became enamored of the person of Jesus Christ and have insisted on his absolute and complete humanity, without his being completely human as we all are, without equivocation. I cannot see that we are redeemed human beings. First poem, I was at a mass, a funeral mass of someone we loved. Above the altar was a crucifix, which to me was the most realistic that I had ever come across. That very morning on the news, as we went down to the funeral, we got news of the London fire in June of 2017 with so much suffering and horror. By the end of that mass, this poem actually had written itself in my head and had to be rewritten, so it's a tough one. I call it Naming of the Bones, and I'm addressing Christ crucified. I looked up and saw you, your distorted body writhing again in agony. There is a season, the big book says, a time to die, a time to weep, and a time for peace. No one, it says, can understand what is happening under the sun. But I saw the bare breast heaving, that once beautiful breast. I hurt for you, for your beloved, once beautiful body. Each twist or twitch, each reach and wrench adds to the fire in your flesh and bones. And I plead to Creator, Lover, God, for you, to ease your pain, to mother you. I wince once more at the bitter spittle angers of humankind, the blunted iron nails driven through your caring hands, your tender feet, so that, impossible, you hang from them and stand on them, and the muscles cramp and spasm, and your face, so beautiful once, is contorted with spit and ugliness, with blood and sweat and tears. But today, my Christ, June 24, 2017, Grenfell Tower in London was engulfed in flames, inestimable suffering, furnace unbearable. A child appears for a moment at a window of the 16th floor, a moment only, frantic and waving to a not there Saviour, you. We hurt, my Christ, we hurt. Why is our spittle hot with bitterness? And words, the big book says, can be wearisome, a chasing after wind, and yet the world breaks, the world reforms, but the beautiful body breaks and yields. And yearning and grief trouble us. At the heart of it, you hurting. That's the tough one. I do see life as beautiful. I see humanity, in spite of everything around us, as beautiful. I see us all as one great community, no matter how we describe or name our God. And I see movement, evolution, as towards an omega, which is some form of perfection amongst us all. So we are all one, and therefore we embrace one another. It began as a Christmas poem, where I saw Mary, Mother, kissing the newborn child. And I said, oh, okay, Spirit is heaving at me again. Get going. He gave me the title, The Kiss. And then he says, now, off you go. Do the rest of it. So this is The Kiss, Cosmos, the cosmic poem. I see the mother, wearied and still hurting, lean in over the child newborn and kiss his lips so gently, so wonderfully, cherishing the baby sent from that damp flesh, the touch of clay of the good earth. Moment of woman greeting cosmos, of cosmos calling to its creator, kiss of earth and heaven. There will be the caress of the child, from the mountain high to the slaughter table of the lamb, from the unformulated palate of the sloblands to the skein of geese come wheeling and crying through suburban dusk. And I see a wilderness of tents across infertile ground, scattered like sheets blown down off a clothesline, the women's caftans blowing in a desert wind, while a child sits in the dirt, flies at his lips and nostrils. Look, God with us tramps the swampy, washed-away ditches with the Rohingya Muslim refugees of Myanmar, who bears the perishable child Jesus in his arms and gazes up bewildered towards the sky of a foreign land. See how we are blessed, returning with the host that has scarcely graced our lips. And though you and I are aging, we can offer each other the kiss of mutual trust and surrender. Listen, Yeshua, child, snores softly, wrapped in a blue wool blanket on the bench beside a stubborn old down and out who is snoring loudly. You will know love, the way you can accept the kiss of froth when the wave is spent beneath your feet. And perhaps at the end, at the forgetting, you'll cherish the kiss of the child on your cold, and cold and colder lips. So, lulle, lulle, then, thou little tiny child. Thy mother's breast awaits thee to nourish thee, and thy father's arms to gentle thee, and his robe to shelter thee from the wild winds. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and thanks everyone for these beautiful poems. One of the things that I'm hearing from my colleagues is this inheritance of faith that has been passed on to us by our parents and our grandparents, and what we do with that inheritance. I mentioned earlier that I'm the granddaughter of immigrants from Sicily and from Rome, and these were not educated people. They did not bring a lot with them, but one of the things they brought with them was their faith. And I will say it was a peasant's faith. It was not an intellectualized faith at all. And so I grew up in a household that was, let's put it this way, we weren't the best Catholics on the block. The Irish were much more observant than we were in my Italian-American Catholic family, a lot of do-it-yourself Catholicism. But it certainly marks us. The stories that we grow up with, the statues of the saints that dominate our houses, the crucifixes that are everywhere, the big story, of course, of Christ's story, his life, his death, the redemption that's held out for all of us. So even when we're not thinking about writing like Catholics, we can't help but write like Catholics. As Flannery O'Connor says, and many of us are Flannery fans, I know, when you write with the whole personality. You're not just somehow cutting off that part of yourself. So all of this in terms of talking about the couple of poems that I want to read today. I don't usually write devotional poetry, but I had an experience a couple of years ago when I went to the Holy Land of visiting all of these storied places that I had heard about through the Gospels over many, many years since childhood, and all of a sudden I found myself in these landscapes. And it was such a powerful experience to have this embodied experience of being at the Sea of Galilee, this embodied experience of being in the town of Magdala, where Mary of Magdala came from, and this embodied experience of being at the crib, purportedly where Jesus was born, the Nativity Church in Bethlehem. And so these poems just erupted, and as we've been saying all day, they come to you as gifts. You can't fight them off, and that's where these poems came from. So I'm going to read a triptych of poems that's from this book, Holy Land, and then I'm going to read a very different poem at the end, and I'll talk a little bit about that one. The epigraph to this book, by the way, the poems are not just about the Holy Land, the Holy Land. The argument of the book basically is that all places are holy places. The first epigraph comes from Exodus: remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And the second comes from Chief Black Elk, who says, the Holy Land is everywhere. These three poems within the triptych, by the way, are all sonnets. I am today going to make the argument that the sonnet is a deeply Catholic form. It was invented, in fact, by a Sicilian, Giacomo Lentini. Petrarch usually gets the credit, but it was really Lentini who invented the sonnet. It's 14 lines, of course, which is the same number as the Stations of the Cross. So every sonnet is a journey. 1. The Storm Chaser. The Mount of the Beatitudes, October 16th, 2019, 7 a.m. Running along the Sea of Galilee, I see you in your boat, tall brown man that you are, standing in the prow, arms raised in supplication to the skies, wind-whipped tunic blowing wild and high as the waves that have paralyzed your friends who have hit the deck and now lie prone on the sodden wood, dumb as stone and waiting for what surely is the end, so low in the boat I can't even see them. You alone are all might, pure motion in the shape of a god, This small ocean, no match for your infinite love, for them, for the sky, for the sea, and yes, even for me. 2. The Thief. The epigraph to this poem comes from the book of Mark. Jesus turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" When she touched him, she stole his fire. Woman Prometheus, who wouldn't take no for an answer. She was bold and full of blood, despised creature who crept along the edges of the swollen crowd. When she spied gold, bore her broken body to the sun center of the Lord's pulsing love. Call it a miracle it took two to make. Call it a reverse Midas moment, but tell it true and tell it blunt. Her sudden bout of faith, her long torment, her taking what her God would not give. Long after his dying, she would live. 3. Christ sighting, December 25th, the Church of the Nativity, Bethlehem. Here comes the dark, the dearth of the year, and here comes Christ again, born when he's least expected and most needed. Now and here, in the midst of famine, comes this feast, fit for fools, surrounded by the ruin we have made of our own earth, the rivers black with mourning for the jewels they once were, the air thick with smoke from the charred trees. Now, in the darkness, we fall to our knees in wonder at the baby birthed just for us. We deserve nothing, no small sign of luck. In a world ripped by rage, choked with anger, love lies sleeping in a dirty manger. And the other poem that I mentioned that I'd like to read is very different in tone, and it is a devotional poem, but the subject of my devotions is Frank Sinatra rather than Jesus. Of course, earlier we were talking about this idea of beauty being so important, the first most important thing that draws us to faith. The premise of this book, Saint Sinatra, was we all know that goodness is the actually John Paul II says in his letter to artists, beauty is the instantiation of goodness in the world, and artists, our vocation is beauty. So why not give sainthood to those who are practitioners of beauty? And certainly Italian-American hero Frank Sinatra was a great practitioner of beauty. And the other thing I love about this is you'll see Frank is floating among Flangelico's Communion of Saints here. We all, of course, belong to the Communion of Saints, and it's very comforting that if there's room for Frank there, there's room for all of us. So this is called Saint Sinatra, and the epigraph comes from the great Cardinal Avery Dulles, former colleague of mine at Fordham University, who once said in a homily on All Saints' Day, "Saints are the most excellent of voices, the most brilliant of stars." And I said, my God, he's talking about Frank Sinatra. So, Saint Sinatra. Croon to me, baby, blue eyes smiling, so easy to love night and day. Skinny legs draped in gabardine as you sway, sweet and easy, singing. The mic, your attribute, lucky close to those lips. In other words, baby, kiss me. I've got a crush on you, sweetie pie, you, Sicilian saint of song. The one girls pray to when we lie awake, pictures of boys in our heads, each of them holy card pretty as you, only in the blue of evening. You and the night and the music, much more than we can stand. We fall to our knobby knees, genuflect to your smooth slide down the scale of desire, a true tune we know but can't carry. Oh, Hoboken hero of Eros, star-eyed stranger in the night, pray for us, sinner. Sing us alive. Take these Valentine hearts from our hands. Thank you.
Okay. I will read. I have a short poem, very short poem, and a long one. So I'm gonna read the first one both in Italian and in English. The second one I will read only in English because. And in the middle, I'll probably say what I would like to say, and then also we end with the poetry and with my words. It sounds weird, but it's okay. Both of these poems come from a book that is titled Most of the Stars, and it's a book entirely written about America. I really tried to tell a tale about America, and I really trying to go towards epic, because I strongly feel that we're missing it, and we really need it back. Ohio. Attraversare. 1. John Rankin, Underground Railroad, XIX secolo. John Rankin, pastore presbiteriano. Sono la casa al di là del fiume Ohio. Mi staglio in cima alla collina, visibile fin giù nelle campagne del Kentucky. Gli schiavi ci vedono come la luce di un faro elevati, lontano, lontano, una favola che ci si scambia alzando gli occhi, ma non si dice. Ed io e la mia famiglia preghiamo. E un giorno felice uno di loro si sveglia disperato, il cuore stretto in quella favola, come una roccia che scricchiola nel pugno di una radice. Ohio, Crossing 2 is the second poem about crossing. John Rankin, Underground Railroad, 19th century. John Rankin, Presbyterian pastor. My home's across the Ohio River, standing out on the hilltop, visible for miles through the Kentucky landscape. The slaves see us like a city on a hill, or a lighthouse elevated, far, far away, a fairy tale. They tell each other, lifting their eyes but not their words. As for my family, we pray. And one happy day, one wakes up despairing, his heart strained by that tale, like a rock that is creaking in the fist of a root. Mystery is not unconquered territory. It's the very substance of reality. In order for me to wake up to these truths, I needed America. It is said that dreaming about a new room in your house symbolizes an awakening of your soul or a progression in your spiritual and mental life. Well, my awakening happened slightly differently for me. It was not a dream, it was a land, and that land brought me a vision, in the sense that allowed me to see myself immersed into a vision. The abysmal darkness in Dante's hell, the abysmal plains dominated by their abysmal skies. I guess America introduced me to the abyss, and to a new way of looking at my faith. I had to find out about God in a very old, a very ancient way. I came to find out about his vastness, his immense power, even his violence. Hurricanes and deserts were a mere reflection of his power, but at least they were a true glimpse of him. Something I had never experienced before in my well-combed Italian land, and in my too well-domesticated European civilization. I guess I had to find God through his vastness and wildness, so that I could find Jesus again, finally in a way that was worthy to me. Because what will Jesus' love ever be to us if our hearts cannot harbor a true sense of infinity or eternity, if our souls have stopped longing for the unmeasurable and have stopped fearing it? When I came back from America, my heart was ready to ask the right questions. Questions big enough so that Jesus could finally open my ears and my eyes, heal my senses. Now I know that we cannot have a true sense of God without first having a true sense of infinity and mystery. And we cannot have a true sense of mystery without having a true sense of reality. So now, what I have been trying to do since I came back from USA is to teach kids and whomever is willing to listen, how poetry can really help us to truly perceive reality. Poetry is nothing to me but witnessing. Being a Christian poet for me is to try to help people to literally come back to their senses through poetry, give humans an accurate enough glimpse of reality, and they will be on their way to awaken to God's presence. Okay, this is a poem about a girl that died in a train accident a very long time ago. She was 16, she was a genius. She used to study astronomy, astrophysics, and her dream was about becoming an astronaut. Maryland, Chase, Sunday, 4 January 1987. Two trains collided on the northeastern corridor. Series Millicent Horn speaking. There is something of me among the stars. I know it sounds silly. A fire scatters so far that you can hardly keep yourself together. How do I explain it at just 16? I am in college studying astrophysics. What have you been up to? I'm getting into the ultrasonic music that one clouds, even with just the steam of his breath, when for a moment he forgets about the window pane. It's Sunday, and I'm on the train, studying relativity, so next semester I can take advanced physics. Getting into Princeton at my age is my way of running towards those stars as fast as possible, to become an astronaut and earn their gold, tremulous and untouchable, the perfect liberty. I'm so used to their call, beyond this wall of sound. When the train whistles, its alarm roars in my ears like thunder. A guy who was looking out the window one moment ago only has enough time to scream, get up, and run 2 strides toward the back of the train. Others will be able to tell you of the devastating impact of the explosion, and tell you about the dismembered train, car by car, ending up inside the courtyards of the houses of the cheerful West Twin River community. They will talk about the victims and say my name. They will say that I was a genius superstar. You will never know how much your words exceed your truth. I could even try to name this real knowledge, the answer of the stars to my questions. Might say the violence of grace, but it would go in one ear and out the other. There is no image more apt than an avalanche. You want to climb, and instead there is a rumble that descends and closes in among the panic until it overwhelms. Before the time that you have saved crumbles on impact, you shout. And a second after the wave overwhelms you, you are there laughing. You almost feel silly, and then you realize that you can see your body from above through a dense layer of anhydrides. After a while, in the same second, you can fix your eyes on first aid, and finally see the miracle of the sun suspended like a sphere burning in darkness detached from every horizon. Feeling his terrible wind on your forehead, protons and electrons escaped from the corona to touch the threshold of the exosphere. In just a minute, you are at the edges of Orion's arm. But you can still drive head fist among the gyres of our galaxy to reach his bottom with your cheek, and all the while still place it on the rail or onto that side of your derailed car flipped to the sky. You can feel his January cold sheet metal burn your face, even if you are in the freezing arms of outer space. Stars and stripes in the 4 dimensions are like some final sense of a strange American flag. As you ascend into the mystery of it all, how intensely everything exists, good and fair, tailored to your all-too-human yearning. I don't even have time to wholly realize that it's come true, that I've been waiting for this all-consuming moment since I was a child. And now I may just have to stretch my arm back down through years, through the oceanic light of the outermost stars. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And before Lyndon comes back up, I just thought I would note if you're wondering, gosh, how am I going to keep all of this in my mind, and you haven't seen it, there's a little QR code in the corner of the back of your book. And in that you'll find all of the poems, or nearly all of the poems and writings that we're going to be referring to in this conference. We didn't want to print out 100 copies with 70 pages and have things go to waste. We are concerned about ecological concerns. Also, you have your bottle, so hold on to that. The other reason, of course, is we're not wanting to violate any copyright laws because many of these things appear elsewhere. So we're not printing them out and distributing them, but these are for you to be able to refer to in the course of the conference these next few days. I just wanted to point that out. So again, QR code in the back of your booklet where you'll find all of these lovely poems and essays and bits of fiction.
Well, thank you, Joe. And let me just take this opportunity to say thank you to all of you for giving us such a special experience this afternoon. It has been wonderful to hear your work and to enjoy its richness and poignancy. And it has been very affecting. A contemporary Scottish poet who I greatly admire, Jim McGonigal, has written that it is well nigh impossible to enter into the experience of another's faith. And I think that on the evidence of our panel this afternoon, I disagree. Of course, he's also written that the poetic language of faith provides us with names for nameless things, and he's paraphrasing the poet Hugh McDermott there, and I agree with that certainly a little bit more. Some of the shared themes that I think have emerged from the wonderful work that we've heard this afternoon include memory and grief, the immanence of God, maybe rather than the transcendence of God, to draw on the work of Andrew Greeley, grace, ceremony, ritual, spiritual practice, and place. And it seems to me that a theme that can be traced often in much of the work that we've heard this afternoon is that relationship between faith and nature and place. Place has a grounding effect. It roots us, faith has a grounding effect, and it roots us to place. But it might also accentuate displacement or the idea of multiple homes. And I wonder if we could just begin the conversation now by asking each of you what it means to be a Catholic and a poet in your particular geography of the world amidst a secular culture. And what is that importance of place to you? So whoever wants to go first can jump in. I'm not going to make you do it. I'm not going to make Philip go first and put him on the spot. He's had a hard enough time. Does anybody want to start us? Please.
Maybe I will share my observation because I try to understand what does the religious or Christian imagination mean, but I was not sure coming here about what Catholic imagination, particularly Catholic imagination, means. And now, after all these presentations, I can say that Catholic is something more than Christian, because in Catholicism there is mission inscribed. Mission means going out to the people. And I've noticed that no one here writes very charismatic way. There is a strong wave in Polish poetry in the last 20 years of linguistic, charismatic, experimental writing. And the poets doing their best to be not read. and listening to this presentation, understood that all these poetry voices such different from each other, but all of them try to connect, to be understood, to meet with the reader. And also all these voices proved to me that the truth of poetry is nothing to be produced in the language. It's something which is behind the poetry words. We can only, like in tabernaculum, we can try to capture the truth in within the words, but of course we can't express the truth. We can't capture the mystery of a God and so on. So sometimes I feel that we as writers and you as writers and readers at the same time, we really meet not in words exactly, but behind the words or in silence. That's why poetry in translations is possible, because it's nothing linguistically national. So yeah.
I wanted to just say how humbling it is to be in an environment where, that is to say, in Rome and Italy, where English is not the spoken language, and yet the conference is in English. And so, as an American, sort of wrestling with empire and its tentacles, as a Catholic writer, as a poet, I see the necessity for prophetic witness and to insist on those at the margins require a kind of a voice, and that they're at the heart of our faith and at the heart of God. That is, those on the margins are at the heart of God. So to be a writer in the United States is to testify to the excesses of imperial power in its manifestations both abroad and at home. You know, in a city like Cleveland where there's rampant poverty and it's in a kind of apartheid poverty where the black community experiences it at far higher levels than anyone else. And at the same time, to me, that we need to insist that prophetic protest is not simply a dark vision of the nihilism at the heart of human beings, but also that there's something else in us and that there is another way and there's another path. I hope that my work does that, and I know that the work of these folks do. And by the way, I have to say, I'm just so relieved that doubt is part of faith and that spinning coin. I'm just that, to me, like, I have enough. I'll see you later. Mic drop.
If I might come in at the stage, to be a Catholic writer as opposed to anything else, I think, may well apply to the sacramental side of the way Catholicism sees the world. And I take nature, I don't like the word nature, I prefer to call it creation, the whole creation, as sacramental. Therefore, diving into nature poetry, if you like, is in fact, in some roundabout form, Catholic poetry. Now, the bad news is that artificial intelligence is on its way and it will answer all our questions without conferences or congresses. But for the time being, I think the world that we are living in at the moment, with its violence and its materialism and all of that, is a huge challenge. And I find it frustrating that I cannot make a poem that is against violence or war. I have done a few, tried to, but it doesn't seem to work too well. I think you need to absorb more before the poem comes. The other thing about Ireland at the moment, and I'm sure this is possibly the same all over the place at the moment, is that to be a Catholic writer, to be a Christian writer, to mention the word God, to mention the word Jesus, you're out. They do not want to know. My most recent book, I think, is a good one, a very good one, but it's very, very Christian. And the Irish Times, which is our main outlet, and the only newspaper in our country that would even consider reviewing serious books, would not review my book. And I had an argument with the book's editor about it, and I accused him in various ways and means, and he basically said bye-bye, and that the book would not be reviewed. And then we came out with, which I think is another very beautiful book. This is a joint book with another Irish poet who is not Catholic, but is a believer in another form. So we had a dialogue during the COVID by email as to what he's writing about and how he's writing about it and how he sees God and how I see God. And we put 40 pages of what we consider our best Catholic or God poems each, and then we have also printed the dialogue in it. And I know this is James Harper is the other poet in here. He's an exquisite poet and a very good one. That book has not been reviewed in the Irish Times and will not be reviewed as far as I can see. I sometimes stand up when I'm doing readings and things and I say, have I any poems that don't actually mention God in some form or other? So I don't embarrass myself. And then I said, to hell with it. This is what I believe. So you're going to get God, whether you like it or not. And at a particular launch of this book, where God came hot and heavy from every angle, we sold out every book we had. So I think underlying contemporary living is nearly a desperate need at this stage for what we are trying to do, for what poetry is trying to do, to touch on the transcendent in some form or other, and to bring that into the dialogue or whatever it is that is going on in the world at the moment. I think we are at a very, very difficult and a very important turning point in human history. And I won't be around to see how it develops, but at the moment it is a great challenge, and it's a great challenge, I think, to poetry and to faith. I mean, doubt is essential to faith. If you don't doubt, I don't believe you've got faith. There is no faith without doubt. And it's important to doubt. But, as I say, we've got to do something about it. I'm not sure poetry will change the world this time around. But I think the importance of this Congress has already shown itself in the poetry that has been offered and in the 3 introductions earlier. And I'm very proud and very honored to be among you all.
You bring up so many interesting and important things, John, in terms of where we are. To be a Catholic poet, none of us really wants to write just for the Catholic ghetto, but frequently we find that we are. Even the press that you publish with can bring its prejudices. I publish with a Christian press called Paraclete Press, and people immediately see that no way the New York Times Book Review is going to review any of my books. So I've kind of given up hope for that. So I do feel as though what we are doing is very countercultural in many ways. We come, all of us, from secular societies, or at least secularized societies. But I keep going back to the fact that all poets are doing the same work. The phrase that's been coming up a lot for me lately is the Hebrew term tikkun olam, the idea of repairing the world. It is the job of human beings to repair the broken world. And the world is a place. Speaking of, the original question, what does place mean to you? This is the place we live in, this world, this broken down, flawed world that is constantly at war with itself, in which people die terrible deaths, like the horrifying and sad and beautiful story that Pietro tells in his poem, Maryland. We suffer, human beings suffer terribly, and we're very fortunate to have this story of the incarnation. We're very fortunate to have this mythos, this Judeo-Christian poem, basically, that helps us to understand the role of suffering in the suffering world and helps us as poets, workers, makers of beautiful things, hopefully, to help to repair the world. As you were speaking, I was thinking of Dostoevsky's wonderful phrase, beauty will save the world. Beauty will save the world. If there's anything that can save it, it's going to be beauty. And that's what we're charged with, trying to create that beauty and enter into the conversation in any way that we possibly can. And also create within I love this kind of intentional community of Catholic artists that we've been building on over the years since we started the Catholic Imagination conferences. But I also love the Misa at the end of the Mass. Go out into the world and bring other people in, and spread the good news that this is not everything, that there is hope, that there's possibility. People want to think that Christians are Pollyanna-ish somehow. And I like Flannery's answer to this. Well, people think faith is a big electric blanket when really it's the cross. It's very hard to be a faithful person in the world, as it's difficult to be a doubtful person in the world. And I think that the more that we are able to get other artists and other human beings to understand that we're all about the same thing, that we can reach some kind of place of agreement and place of working together.
Now, maybe I'm discovering the hot water, but I think that geography is a part of the grace. I was born in Italy in the last quarter of 20th century, in a family of the working class, very poor working class. And I went to the church like all the others child of my generation did. If I born today, maybe in Italy too, 600 kilometers from Rome, from Vatican, all these things wouldn't happen. So this is the starting reasonment, because I say this because I can't. I can see the things. I can think the things. I can see and think everything without a Catholic shape that precedes me. For the only fact that I'm born in Italy, in Turin, in the last quarter of the 20th century. And this is a sort of heritage that I have in mind, that I have in me, if I want it or if I don't want it. The heritage is there. My decision is to take account of him, to use it. When someone talk of the mission that that poetry has, I must confess that I'm very egoist. Usually I don't mind so much of mission in my life too. But there's an aspect in which the mission could be retrieved. And this is that I live my life, and my life needs to understand itself, because I really understand nothing. Nothing. Every day I am an ignorant. I think, I believe that I'm cultivated, that I know many things, but I'm ignorant. Everything that happens to me, I don't understand nothing. My life called me. It's a vocation. Everything that happens in the day, and I need to understand what is happening. And my poetry has always been this. I begin at 15, 16, about to write songs, and then poetry, then poems. And my poetry has always been this. I try finding the right words and trying to put it in the right places to understand what I live. And then, this is what I do, and what I do today still. And I think if others encounter me, they surely encounter all my heritage and all my strive. I hope I have replied, I answered to your question. Thank you.
I'm sorry for standing up, but there is no enough space here, so there's okay. No, okay. There are two. This is a twofold answer for me. The first is like more universal, as a more universal aspect to it, which is the main crisis in our world is a crisis of the language. This is not. I'm strongly convinced of this. This is not a question of politics. It's not a sociological thing. This is a linguistic problem. This is a problem about the word, not the world, the word. And we had done a very bad job in these last 2 centuries. We really fumbled. Can you say that? Yeah. Really fumbled as poets. Okay, but then I don't want to. We can talk maybe more while we're not right now. But this is a very important issue for me. We don't think through thoughts. We think through words, and we think through language. And also, we don't only do that. We also perceive reality through words. We see through language, and we touch through language. There is something that T.S. Eliot is one of the greatest master that I had in my life, along with Giuseppe Ungaretti, which is an Italian poet. And he said, "You have never experienced something until you've said it. You've found the word to say it. And this is very important because, I mean, I deal with kids like a lot, and they have lost. Guys, they ratify reality through the screen. They don't even. They think they're seeing the door, but they're not seeing the door. Unless they see it there in their screen, they don't think it's true. They don't think it's real. This is very serious, and it has nothing to do with politics and all the rest, all the other. I'm very passionate, so I don't want to curse right now. But all the other BS that comes out of that is just a consequence. Okay, so we need to get back to reality, and poets have to stop, like some of my colleagues were saying before. We need to stop like talking about life, kinda, from our ivory towers, finding strange way of saying things. We need to get to reality. We need to stop going around, messing around, and we need to start witnessing things, because it's through the flesh of reality and through the matter of the creation that we can get back people to God, first of all, to a sense of mystery first, and then to God. But that God will do the rest. This is not up to us. We just need to bring them back to reality, and then God will do the rest. But we need to do that, at least. That's the minimum thing. Okay, sorry. The second thing is about Italy, but it's like a kind of it has to do with what I just said, basically. But it's very similar to the Polish thing. We don't even. Okay, there is a very good friend of mine. Her name is Rossella Tempesta. She's a great poet. And she said that sometimes she entertains herself with her husband, and she picked some poetry book of Italian contemporary poet and start reading, and then she picks another one, and the husband, that has nothing to do with poetry, it's never read, and is not an expert, said, but that was the same poet. It is, and she picks another. It's like 10 poets, and they speak the same. They say not this. They don't say maybe the same thing, but they speak the same way. they think they're doing such an original job, but they're speaking from the same voice. And then we're going biblical, so I'm not going to go there. But it is not the voice of God, because it's the same voice. This is the voice of the world. The enemy wants us there. And we have been doing a very bad job keeping him at bay. I'm sorry. Okay.
May I add? I'm afraid I have a very short poem perfectly illustrating this need of coming back to reality and this problem with that these doors are not the door which we perceive. The title is identical with the title of the Polish translation of the legendary Roland Barthes book, Lovers' Discourse Fragments. I caught her in the act of looking through a porn mag. Pointing at a picture of a naked man, I asked her, "What is that?" "Ceci n'est pas un pipe." She answered me, taking me into the bracket of her legs. And today I came home early from work, and in a passage, I bumped into a naked man and asked, "What is that?" Pointing at him, or rather at his manhood freshly smeared in lipstick. "That's a pipe." I heard the answer from the woman with whom I'm still sleeping, because I cannot prove her infidelity.
Thank you. Well, we're almost at time. You've kept beautifully to time. I know I've been very strict and quite intimidating in my stipulation that every poet should speak for no more than 8 minutes. We're going to carry the conversation on, perhaps over refreshments, because we're having a break until 5 o'clock. But I hope that this will just be a semicolon on the conversation and not a full stop. So please, I wonder if you would join me again in thanking our poets so much for the very rich afternoon.